Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, the ups and downs, and how to navigate life with kids on your own while keeping sane. Covering subjects such as domestic violence through to fussy eaters and solo dating. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest currently works as a counsellor and a yoga teacher with a particular interest in addiction. She's spent many years working in drug and alcohol rehabilitation settings where she learnt from her clients, rather than from formal education, the true origins of addiction, which is trauma and emotional pain management, which we've covered on this podcast several times before. So recently, she completed an honours in psychology at Victoria University, where her thesis subject was on masculinity and its relationship to suicide. This satisfied a long-standing curiosity she had about men's mental health and suicide. She is soon to become a first-time mum and discover the fascinating world of natural birth practices, which I'm sure is fascinating, but she may not want to be discovering it. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining us here today. How are you?
I'm good, Claire. Thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here.
No, thanks for coming on board. Look, I've just gone through your intro and you were studying masculinity and suicide, which are... I can understand why you studied both of them. I have an interest in both of them as well, having a son and having lost several of my friends to suicide, which completely blows my mind how I could have, have friends who were in such a dark hole that, couldn't reach out, that found that was the only way and means of actually getting some relief from their life. So look, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to do this study.
Similar to you, Claire, actually. I grew up I experienced a lot of friends who did commit suicide, male friends. And I also grew up in an area that had a lot of traditional roles. Like the traditional gender roles were very fixed in the area that I grew up in. And so, men or boys were brought up to be tough and invulnerable, and boys don't cry. And I witnessed, probably from teenage years onwards, my male friends kind of egging each other on to, get intoxicated, binge drink, use violence, risk take, in actually really dangerous ways as a way to kind of prove manhood. And from that, as we, got older, I lost friends and people in the community to being king hit, to suicide, to people having accidents when they were intoxicated. And I kind of grew up with that as the norm.
I know.
Which was really, at the time, I didn't necessarily see the alarm bells because it was the norm. But it wasn't until I started working as a counsellor in the drug and alcohol sector, and I started working with adult men and as a counsellor, and we started to delve into their histories, and they were telling me the same stories that I saw my friends experience. But they were also saying things like, they've never known emotional support. They've never been taught to express emotions. They've never even been taught how to identify emotions. So a lot of them didn't even know how they felt.
Okay. That's interesting. But then I suppose if you've not been shown or told, well, that's anger or that's anxiety or that's being depressed or and actually put a label on it, then how would you know?
That's exactly right. And that's what research is showing, that men and women or boys and girls experience the same emotions. they're just conditioned to respond to them differently. And emotions for boys, we're talking about in a traditional, masculine sense, any emotion that's considered feminine, like sadness or even empathy, they're not encouraged, or like little boys don't get that reflected back to them. It's like, boys don't cry, right? So,
well, exactly. It was funny because that was just about what I was going to say. And God love my dad. However, we have chastised him, both me and my mother. But with my son, he says, "Oh, don't scream like a girl." So it's that exact do you know what I mean? And like, I mean, crikey, he's like 73, so it's going to be hard to change him. But he was brought up, in the 50s and 60s where those sort of things were said, because
they were the cultural norm. That is a really good example. Thank you for saying that, because that is a perfect example of traditional masculine norms that are starting to change, however, are still very thick in our psyches and in our language. And sometimes we don't even realize that we say these things or that we think these things as parents, or, or just, within our communities. It's the way that we view men. So that's a really good example, and it's definitely changing. But my research showed that it also isn't,
Wow, okay.
It isn't, in the sense of men. There are still more men than women that commit suicide globally, albeit a few countries. A few countries it's women, but it is mostly men. And it's really interesting to watch when these peaks of suicide happen. It's usually around an economic crisis. So think like the Great Depression or Wall Street crash. There's peaks of suicide, and it makes sense because of the traditional breadwinner role for men. And how can you be the breadwinner at a time when, the economy is really struggling? And then the stress that they're feeling because of that, they don't have the opportunity to talk about it, because men don't talk about emotions, or they've been trained not to.
No, exactly. Okay, so let's take a step back. So you were brought up within this really, and I suppose in a way I was as well. I'm probably 20 years earlier than you though, but like I was brought up in this very much like, and I know it's an Aussie saying and we don't have it in the UK, but it's very much have a cup of concrete and harden up sort of thing, and all of this stuff. And like big boys don't cry and various and be come on mummy's little soldier and all of these sort of things. So you were brought up in that. So how did you then went into drug and alcohol rehabilitation?
That's right.
So what made was there a turning point that you went, I'm going to go and work in drug and alcohol because and rehabilitate people? Like how did you, because you could have done anything. You could have I don't know, climbed a mountain or whatever. Do you know what I mean? How did you morph is maybe not the right word, but like how did you move into, hey, that's a good word, move into drug and alcohol?
Yeah, good question. I always had an interest because I had my own issues.
Okay.
So growing up in that, interestingly, it's growing up in those traditional roles. Also, it was very normal for girls and women to be kind of like the boys. It was like that dominant masculine thing where it's like if you drink like a boy or you drink like a man, then kudos to you, you're a really cool chick. So I grew up in that culture, and I was a binge drinker, and I never saw that as addiction until I started working in AOD, only through being placed there as my placement. My post-uni placement was I always had an interest, though. I always did have an interest. And by the stage of, me getting my qualification and working as a counsellor, I had stopped drinking. And that was because it was just taking such a toll on my mental health and on my physical health. And but it really, I got my placement there, but then it also helped me to realise educate myself about my own past, which was, holy cow, binge drinking is addiction, because I didn't have an off switch, and I couldn't say no. Like, I couldn't go out without drinking. It was an impossible idea to go out and be sober. So learning that, wow, that is addiction, and learning how pervasive it is, you know, just seeing it everywhere and how normalized it is in our culture, really inspired me to continue working in that field, and also recognizing that people that really struggle with substance misuse have have experienced a lot of hardship and really need the most support. And so, it was very inspiring to work with these people, actually, and learn about their experiences, and learn that substance misuse isn't necessarily a choice, even though we often view it as that. It's often self-medication and a way to survive.
It's pain management at the end of the day. I think, you know, we've talked about this previously, and in the fact that, you know, there's emotional pain, there's traumatized. You're talking about a traumatized individual for whatever reason, and it can be many, many reasons. And they can be so varied, because it can be somebody who had what, from the outside looking in, is a perfect childhood, but you know, there were traumas or misunderstandings or things that happened within their life that they interpreted a certain way, and they weren't, it wasn't communicated or managed with them correctly, potentially, that then led to pain, emotional pain, that they then, instead of medicating, like maybe, you know, they're medicating it with alcohol or drugs, like we would medicate a headache with paracetamol, basically.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's, I think you really, like, leading back to my research is exactly what you said there, where it's like, it's not necessarily about the trauma that happened. I mean, sometimes it is, depending on what the trauma is.
Yes.
But often, or like, there's new research with PTSD that they're discovering that it's not so much about the incident, it's about how much support and what kind of support did that person receive after the incident. And that's probably what's going to determine whether someone has PTSD. And that's what I kept hearing through these people's experiences. They had, some of them had horrific traumas, but also they had absolutely no support. And, you know, that was for men and women, but there were always more men than women in these rehabs that I worked in. And the evidence shows in research that, men have more substance misuse problems. There's more men than women. And that leads back to the research, and that's because they don't know how to identify and talk about emotions. Again, I feel like I'm generalizing. I'm not saying all men, but it's when they've adopted the traditional masculine stereotypes, they don't know how to identify, articulate, and seek support for what they're experiencing. So, it ends up being self-medication.
Wow. And so through your work with the drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs that you've been on, did you then go, well, I'm going to do a psychology degree and then move into, and that's how you've come into studying masculinity and its connection with suicide as such?
Yeah, pretty much. It was really that I felt like I needed a little bit more of an education around, I really don't like this term, but, you know, the professional term of being abnormal psychology. I felt like, as a counsellor, it's terrible. I hate that term. Let's just say I needed a bit more of a broader understanding of all of the different mental health issues that I was coming into contact with through the drug and alcohol work, because underneath the addiction was usually comorbidities of other mental health presentations that hadn't been addressed for a long time. Again, people were self-medicating to manage mental health distress. So I just felt like I needed a bit more of an education on that. So, I undertook the psychology undergraduate and honours, and the research was a surprise. I didn't think I'd love that aspect of it. It was a surprise. I thought I just got to get this done, you know, because I just want to work with people. But it turned out that I loved it. And I'm like, with this, and this is also where change can happen. Like, I was used to working on the grassroots level, and I could see that, research can really make a big impact because this affects policy and funding and all of those aspects of our like our services, our health services. There was just some options for what kind of, for the thesis options that I could choose from. And there was masculinity. And I was like, oh my God, that was just it. I saw it. I'm like, I want to be a part of that team. It's always been a curiosity of mine because of what I've just told you, my upbringing, what I witnessed in the drug and alcohol rehabilitation centres. I landed it luckily and got to dive deep into like a.
And I find the subject completely like. At the end of the day, I find the subject of masculinity and all that it defines interesting, because at the end of the day, I know our bits are different. Okay, if we're going to get down to the crux of things. But we are all all the crutch of things. We're all human beings, okay? So we all have similar, we would hope, unless we are a sociopath or anything like that, we would all have similar emotions, feelings, all of those sort of things. We deal with them in different ways, admittedly, and that can be through education, that can be through genetics, it can be through various different things. And I know they're exploring all of these at the moment, because I know they're now starting to say that trauma can actually go down through your genes now.
Absolutely.
So the trauma, so my grandfather, God rest his soul, my grandfather, I never met him. He died the year I was born, so I don't know what that means. But my grandfather was a sniper in the Second World War.
Wow.
And he saw amazing, amazing things, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But nobody knows what he saw because he never told anyone, because we're in that masculinity cycle. And the only thing that we ever really knew about what went on, and I'm sure there's other stories that would come out through the family, is that we remember him telling, well, not me personally, but my father remembers him telling a story about where he was walking down a road and his mates on either side got shot because he was in between the gap in the machine gun.
Wow.
So a machine gun just mowed them down, but he lived because he was in the gap where the bullets go through for the machine gun, and his mates died either side of him. And although I'm even like,
profound.
It wouldn't have been a pleasant death, and we don't know how, and I don't know how they were shot or anything like that. So, maybe they were killed outright, let's hope. If they weren't, can you imagine the trauma that he would have gone through this? And he was a sniper, and I apologize, he wasn't a sniper, he was a scout. So he would go into hostile areas to scout out and see where the Germans were and all of this stuff. So you can imagine it was stressful. So all of that stress is in his genes. He came back from war, and then he had my dad, because that was the first child that they had when he came back. And so that trauma potentially has gone into my father, come into me, potentially will go down to my son, my brother's sons, all of this sort of stuff. So it fascinates me so we need to stop this cycle of trauma. Hopefully we have. But it just fascinates me with all of that as well. And I know we can change our DNA and our genes and things like that as such, because we have that fantastic, and I can't think of his name now.
Eagle?
No, is it Brian Lipton?
Oh, Lipton, Lipton.
Where he says, we can adapt our bodies.
Absolutely.
This is what our brain does, and we only use 20% of it or whatever it is. But so it fascinates me how that all is there.
Absolutely.
And how that leads to all of that trauma and Well, we just went down a rabbit hole there, didn't we?
Okay. We did, and that could be a whole nother podcast episode.
It could be. But that's why masculinity actually, that's why it sort of fascinates me to a certain extent, because we're all human, but men well, men fascinate me to one because I don't understand them, but like, we've all been brought up differently as well. So,
For sure.
So, okay, so what was involved in your study then? How did you do your study?
So it was the classic questionnaire style psychology study, but we recruited our participants via an online platform that basically gives you quality data. So these are people that get paid to do questionnaires, and we wanted to do it only within Australia. We were really interested in looking at just the Australian population. So we ended up recruiting 480 Australian adults from all over Australia, and they varied in their professions, religious identities, sexual orientations, because we wanted a real an honest representation of the Australian population. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get all men. I wanted to just focus on men, but I had to get a big sample size. So I included everybody else, anyone who was willing. We did have more men. We had 276 men, 200 women, and 4 that identified as non-binary. And they essentially filled out, I had to research the best questionnaires that really captured traditional masculine norms, suicidal ideation, because I was looking specifically at ideation, not suicide, because how do you measure suicide? Unless you're looking at, deaths, the death, birth and registry thing. But
yeah, I know, yeah.
So I had to look at ideation, which is, I suppose, the first step to suicide. So we had a questionnaire on that. And we also had a questionnaire for psychological distress, just to measure where people were at, how distressed they were, because there is a relationship kind of obviously between psychological distress and suicidal ideation. So people completed those surveys, and then it was data analysis and all the number crunching. And
so did you find a lot of women also filled in the suicide stuff, or was it like, what percentage? So like, if we were looking at men versus women, which I'm already put a bloody wall between us, between the genders already there, but like men, what percentage of men had this suicide ideation, what percentage of women did, or am I putting you on the spot there?
No, not at all. I know it like the back of my hand, a year of just looking at this every day. It's okay. If I didn't know, that would be a concern. It was interestingly, it was pretty much equal, which was a surprise, because there is the kind of the main, there's this idea of the gender paradox where more men than women commit suicide. However, there are more women than men that experience suicidal ideation.
Oh, okay.
So so it was interesting from our sample. It was pretty much equal, like almost dead on equal. I mean, it's never dead on, but as close as you can get to being equal. That men and women from my sample were both equally experiencing suicidal ideation.
So basically, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, your lives can be shit at times.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Do you know what? Yeah. Like, it doesn't, there's, no differentiation there. The differentiator is, I suppose the amount of people who go through with suicide and are successful, if that's a bad word to really put around it, but
completed suicide. Yeah.
So I don't want to dig myself into any hole, because it's a very, I've lost people to suicide, so I have a very relaxed, I do not understand it, and I desperately would love to, because I have a son. And I would never want to think about him being in that situation, which is one of the reasons that I'm like, come on down, Laura, Laura, I'd love to understand about it, because I want to stop it happening for anyone, and so, anyway, we'll stop talking and get into your study. So what did you learn then? So quite even between the sexes of ideology, what am I talking about? Ideation. So what was the different, what else did you learn then between,
So
which was different to the male side of things?
Yes. So it came down to the difference was mostly in the masculine norm, the traditional masculine norm effects. So essentially what we found was relevant for men is that, there was 10 masculine norms that we looked at. And they were, emotional control, self-reliance, violence, risk-taking, this idea of playboy, like infidelity, I suppose, and so on and so on. But the relevant one for men was self-reliance, excessive self-reliance. So when these particular men from my sample adopt that norm that they must be entirely self-reliant, it's not reaching out for support, feeling like they need to do it on their own. They don't want to be a burden on others, these kind of associates.
So isolating themselves as such.
Essentially, yes. That's what it leads to.
Self-perpetuated isolation, really.
Exactly, because of this belief that they must figure it out themselves, that they don't need anyone, they don't need support. So that was a risk factor for suicidal ideation when men were experiencing psychological distress. So if there was already psychological distress and they had excessive self-reliance, it equated suicidal ideation. So that was, yeah.
So a view that, so they were already initially traumatized is basically what you're saying, or had emotional trauma within their life.
They were, at the time of doing our survey, they were under psychological distress. And that could be, we've got to think about we're in a pandemic, and I was doing the study in a pandemic. So, that definitely contributes to psychological distress. And psychological distress is essentially just concurrent symptoms of depression and anxiety. That's kind of, just to say it simply, that's what psychological distress is. So somebody experiencing those symptoms concurrently.
But feeling as though they need to deal with it themselves. This is crazy. I'm a big boy.
Suck it up.
I have to get myself suck it up. I have to get myself through this. I've got people depending on me. I need to sort this out. I've got to come up with a solution. This is all about me. I have to sort this. Nobody else out there can deal with this issue for me, is basically what you're saying.
Exactly. And also the shame around that. Like if they have adopted this idea that comes from our culture, of, men need to be tough and figure it out themselves, and they don't go to psychologists and sit there and talk about their feelings. There's some shame around if they really did want to seek that help, or it's shame even for having those feelings, or for being in a situation where they're feeling overwhelmed. It comes with shame. Because that shame of them not being able to sort it out, it's like a weakness. It's a weakness, exactly. So it's not masculine, right? It's like, there must be something wrong with me. I should be able to handle this. I should be able to handle life, and just acting tough, and it might necessarily be tough as in like in the way that we think about it in that kind of macho way, but just hardening up and pushing it down. So, and I've got to say, I lost a very good friend of mine 7 odd years ago to suicide, and I think we've spoken about it previously. And he was the go-to that we all went to, and he seemed to have it all together. Which we would have never thought. It was a massive surprise. You would have never have thought that he'd got himself to a place where he couldn't get himself out of. And it's as friend, I know I've spoken to a lot of his other friends. As friends, we just go, why didn't he just? But I suppose you're in that place where you go, I have to deal with this myself, and which is not true. It's I must admit, my son's school is teaching that failure is our friend, because we learn from failure. Wow, I love that.
I love that. Yeah, well, so that's really good. So Yeah, wow. So, okay. So how do we help these
Mm-hmm.
people that think they can do it on their own? And, how do we even know? Because I suppose there's no external signs, is there?
That's another awesome question. There can be signs. I mean, again, we're kind of talking about the traditional masculine stereotype here, but so the research I was reading was that for these particular men or people really, because women also adopt these norms.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so they at times don't experience the typical symptoms of depression and anxiety. So they might present at a GP or something just feeling like, oh, I've been really angry, like extra angry, or I've got like some psychosomatic symptoms, like some back pain, or my drinking has increased. Now this is again where this highlights the kind of systematic stuff that needs to change, because often, let's just say men for now, their symptoms get unrecognized as actually potential, pre-markers of suicide and suicidal ideation, because they're not saying the typical things like, I feel really low, I feel really depressed, because of the shame. And also they can't access or identify those feelings themselves. So the symptoms could be, excessive alcohol use, increased alcohol use, anger and frustration, and physiological manifestation. So I think part of the change is a systemic one, which is big, and that will take time. But I think starting at the grassroots level in parenting, in supporting our male friends and encouraging. And I think it really does start with, empowering men and reframing vulnerability as something that is courageous and is something that is a strength, not a weakness. And I know that football clubs and stuff like that are really taking this on because of health issues in football club. Like, football's huge. There's been people that have, lots of people, men even in the AFL that have suicided or had addiction issues, and it's all come back down to mental health awareness. So I think, community is really important, and support and encouragement.
Yeah. And look, and I think we put these football stars, soccer stars, basketball stars, whatever, up on pedestals and go, wow, they're amazing. But we forget they are human beings at the end of the day with the same thoughts, feelings. They have to all go to the toilet the same as we do. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but they're human beings. And, I'm thankful that we've got celebrities like, I'm just trying to think now, I can only think of UK ones, so sorry, but I mean, I'm sure you can think of Aussie one, but we've got Robbie Williams, who came out and said he had an addiction. Elton John was another one who was an addict basically, but through trauma that he was going through. I mean, we've got George Best, one of the best soccer players in the UK, who was an alcoholic basically. There's several, I'm just trying to think of them now, but good
examples.
There's several well-known, well-loved, I mean, like, the world loved them and loves them, who basically were traumatized and were addicted, desperately addicted, and dealing with mental health. Justin Bieber is another one in present day-ish.
Really? I didn't know about Bieber.
Oh my God, yeah. Bieber's was, I suppose, I don't know if he had any addictions, but like, he was depressed. I mean, massively. Britney, I mean, geez, she shaved all her hair off. That was, if that wasn't a cry for help. And what did we do? The media just slated her as a nutter. And, all of these things. Terrible. Pamela Anderson, if you could go down that avenue, and various different other people. I mean, the great Ozzy Osbourne, and like his family. And, I'm surprised the Kardashians haven't gone through any of this, but, as far as we know.
As
Their
far as we
PR is
know,
very good.
yeah.
But, you know, like, yeah, so all of those sort of things, yeah, I'm just pleased that it's getting out there and out in the media, and we're actually highlighting that, you know, you don't have to be doing this on your own. I agree with you. I think it needs to start at school level, and we do need to encourage our kids to say it's okay to be upset, and, you know, to be sad, be happy, be, you know, and do all of those sort of things.
Yep.
So, okay. So was there anything else that came out of the study, or is there anywhere else that you're going with the study now? What's the next steps?
Oh, yeah. Well, I definitely want to continue down the rabbit hole. For me, it's going to be looking at women, you know, as well, because what came out of it was that women are adopting traditional masculine norms more. I don't know if we'd say more, but we just noticed that. I don't know if it's more, but I think it makes sense considering, you know, we're in the neo-feminist era where women can do it all and have it all, and I think that's fantastic. But I also think it has its dark side, which is, you know, women can fall into that traditional masculine norm, those roles of achieving and succeeding, and and
if you can't beat him, join him, sort of thing. You've got to, you know, if you want to be successful in a corporate environment, then you've got to be up there, and you've got to do 120 times better than your male colleagues, because if you don't, then, you know, you're not successful. And sore subject with me, but then we also then
it's a sore subject,
we're successful, but we get paid less, and all the other, and, you know, and if you're a single mum, that's even worse, because you get classed as a second class citizen because your kids come first at various different things. And, you know, there's options where, you know, as a single mum, you could work from home, which would be great, and still be able to do your job, but you still have to come in the office and do all the other stuff. And I think we need to completely rework our working environment. I think COVID has taken steps towards that. I don't believe that going back to the office is the right move 5 days a week for everyone, and I don't even believe the hybrid is. But hey ho, that's a whole different podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's another great one. I
agree with you. It'd be interesting to find out why women feel they need to be masculine. I think I've just highlighted a few points, but yeah, okay, that's awesome.
And I think that's kind of where I want to go, is looking more culturally. I mean, we kind of have ideas, you know, around capitalism. It's all the things we know, the way our society is structured, the way it continues to operate. Yes, things have changed a little bit with COVID, but we've still got a long way to go. It's all built. It's been built into us all, women, men, and non-binary people, that more is more. You know, being busier is better. And all of these, you know, maybe we need to redefine what masculine norms are, because they're not just affecting men. And that's what my research showed, that women are being negatively affected as well when they adopt these traditional masculine norms that come from cultural messages that women can now adopt, because we're now in the game. We're in the working game. You know, where we've got many, many roles. We're not just, you know, we don't just have one role anymore that we did for centuries before now.
It's interesting to see. It would be interesting to see how Insta and all of those sort of things is also influenced, because in a way, the social media, although being great to actually see what your mates are doing and all of this stuff, and look around people's new houses and all these bits and pieces, but it also is about saying, I'm coping. I'm okay.
Absolutely. The facade, yes. Yeah.
And, you know, look at my wonderful life, when actually it's all falling about behind the scenes or whatever. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was to say, hey, being a single parent is awesome, but can also be really shit. So it's around like giving single parents, but also parents, the tools and bringing people like yourself on who have been studying and looking at all of these sort of things and sort of trying to understand, how we help our kids be better, be the better person, better people every single day as such, and move through into life.
I like that.
As not as fucked up as we would hope them to be. So, as we would hope them not to be. I don't know. I've phrased that wrong. It's been a long day. But yeah, there's a book I love which says how to not fuck up your kids completely or whatever it is.
I get it.
Because let's face it, we're all trying our best. We're parenting, there are no booklets with it, as you will soon find out as you can become
too many.
Yeah, well, there's too many. And there's the right thing to do and the wrong thing, and then thing contradicts another thing. And I don't know if, and my belief and view, and I'm very 70s baby, was why are we giving all the kids awards for partaking in stuff? I'm not sure what message that is actually sending out, and I don't know if it's a correct message, but I'm like sitting there going, why are we doing this? And I don't know. Yeah, and being a Gen X.
It's such an experimentation. It's an experimentation, isn't it? Trying to kind of undo the things that didn't work in the past, and we just have to experiment culturally. And I think it's an interesting time because that's being done with gender. Like even the fact that we're kind of looking at masculinity and thinking, things are wrong here. It's incredibly experimental. And I think, but I like what you said there of, doing things, like we want to help our kids, kind of, I suppose, manage life better than maybe we did, or especially that our parents, and the generation.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, and I always say that because my poor mother, she listens to these podcasts and probably goes cock-a-hoop with some of the things I say. But at the end of the day, my mum had me when she was 19. My dad was 21, right? And I sit there and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
If I'd have had a baby at 19 or 21 even, how would I have dealt with it? How would I cope with it? I mean, it's such a young age, probably not back then, but, you're only just learning about life and yourself and things like that yourself. I mean, she didn't have a manual to bring up me and my brother. I don't have one to bring up my son. And I'm bloody 50. So I sit there and I go, it's hard. They push buttons. They do so much that's great and so much that's not so great.
Absolutely. Hardest gig on the planet.
And you're now entering it. So it's all good. I'm telling you all this.
I know. I'm going to apply it all soon.
It's great.
Can't wait.
It's great. So look, is there any way that we can help you? If anyone's listening to this and wants to reach out to you and basically to tell you about, I don't know, their suicidal ideation. I keep wanting to say ideology, but that's not the right word. Ideation, or to help in your research or anything like that. I mean, how do people get in contact with you?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, email's the best way, and I'm absolutely open. I'm available for counselling for another 3 months. So, awesome. Up until, I'll be giving birth in the end of April.
And then we'll be cancelling you.
Then, probably, yes. At least I know where to go. But yeah, email is the best option. And if people have questions about the research, it's actually the paper, my thesis is being put forward for publication. So I'm hoping that's going to be published soon so I can let people know where to read that if they're interested. Awesome. So yeah, reach out via email about counselling or the research.
I'll post the email in the blurb and stuff so people can reach out to you and go from there. And my last question, I ask it to everyone, is what would your superpower be?
It's difficult to choose, actually. I would love to have multiple, but I think ultimately the ultimate superpower for me would be true presence, like fully being 100% presence. It sounds super boring, but to me that is my daily struggle. I meditate, and, I have glimpses of true presence. And when I get that glimpse, life just becomes a whole lot easier, because you're able to really access your inner landscape as well as navigate the external world with honesty, and ultimately allows you to, communicate better and therefore have better relationships, which are the kind of centerpiece of our lives, is healthy relationships.
I agree with you. If you're sitting in a cave on your own, it's a pretty lonely place to be, but we're all about, humans are all about interaction and communicating.
Absolutely.
And being a tribe as such, because that's how we've survived, sticking together. It's just a shame that the world has got so big yet so small with the internet, and we just don't stick together.
That's right. And that's that's a whole nother episode right there.
Oh, it is a whole nother episode. That's great. Let's explore that one. Oh my God.
That's right. That's that kind of, oh God, we could go on and on.
We could.
Basically being enlightened, bring it on. I think that would be my ultimate superpower.
No, that sounds awesome. That sounds brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for talking about your thesis and everything that you've learned on masculinity, the suicide. I'm going to say again,
Yeah, that's it.
Ideation. Ideation. It is. Sorry. No, thank you. I could talk for you for hours. It's just,
I know,
it's just awesome.
Me too.
It's just awesome. Look, I'm sure we'll have you back regarding women and all of that. Let's not leave us women out of it. But thank you so much for coming along today and talking to me.
Thanks, Claire.
And I hope everything goes okay in 3 months' time.
Thank you, me too. We'll be in touch. And thank you for having me. It's been a treat.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Speak to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you'd like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family on all the usual social media platforms that you're normally on. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content that I know you're going to want to hear, like this. If you want to check out past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. Have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one's perfect, and we're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.